A fairly common claim among Christian circles is that the book of Job is one of the earliest books in the Bible. There are Christians who believe that Job lived during the time of Abraham, and that he or one of his friends wrote the book. Is this claim true? We'll be looking at this claim in this video as we turn our attention to the poetic or wisdom literature genre in our study of how the Bible was made. As I have done in the previous genres we have looked at, I will give a brief overview of the books in the genre, and then we will turn our attention to who wrote the book of Job. The books that comprise the poetic or wisdom literature are Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. Most of the material for these books seem to have come from the time of King David and King Solomon around 1000 BC. Some material, though, is much earlier and much later. The book of Job is about the plight of Job and is concerned with the questions of why bad things happen to good people. Most of the book is a discussion or argument between Job and his friends. We will get into the details of the dating of this book a bit later in this video. The Book of Psalms is a collection of prayers and songs. The Psalms cover a wide range of emotions, and as such is one of the more popular books of the Bible. 73 of these Psalms are written by King David, and the rest are written by various authors. The Psalms of David was written around 1000 BC. You have some Psalms that are written quite early, such as Psalms 90, and that was around 1400 to 1200 BC. And the author of this psalm is Moses. And you have some psalms that were written late during the Babylonian exile, such as Psalms 137, and that was comprised 597 to 538 BC. Proverbs is a collection of wise sayings. The book is written by King Solomon to his son. The book of Proverbs was also written around 1000 BC. Ecclesiastes is another book written by Solomon. The point of the book is to show how life is empty and futile without God. The book was written also around 1000 BC. And the last book in this genre is the Song of Solomon. It is a love poem between Solomon and one of his wives. The point of the book is to celebrate material bliss. It's also written around 1000 BC. So now we get to the question of who wrote the book of Job and when was it written? This is a pretty complex question to answer. Many modern secular scholars believe that Job was written by two authors. Commonly, these scholars will ascribe one author to early times in Hebrew history, and the other to late in Hebrew history, such as around the time of the Persian Empire. Many times, this view has the narrative portion of the book being the one written early in Israel's history, and the more conversational part is said to be between Job and his three friends, being a later edition. One of the interesting things about Job is the style of Hebrew that Job is written in. It is quite peculiar. This peculiar style of Hebrew has led some scholars to conclude that this reflects an older style of Hebrew. If this is the case, then the claim that Job is the oldest book in the Bible could have merit. What about the claim, though, that Job and Abraham were contemporaries? I believe the biblical evidence is that Job could have been a descendant of Abraham rather than a contemporary of Abraham. I'm getting that from comparing the genealogy of the Edomites in Genesis 36 to Job's friend Eliphaz's ethnicity. And then I get this from Genesis 36:1 and Job 2:11. Job's 36:1, actually there's verse 1, verse 4, and verse 34, which says, "Now this is the genealogy of Esau, who is Edom." Verse 4 says, "Now Ada bore Eliphaz to Esau, and Basemath bore Ruel." Verse 34 says, "When Jobab died, Husham of the land of the Temanites reigned in his place." And then Job 2, verse 11 says, "Now when Job's three friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him, and to comfort him." Based on these verses, I believe the author of Job is letting us know that some of the characters in Job are Edomites. Edom, or Esau was the grandchild of Abraham, and so clearly Job and Abraham could not have been contemporaries. This means that probably the earliest Job could have been written was sometime during the children of Israel's stay in Egypt before the Exodus, which puts the date of this writing in the 16 to 1200 BC range. And of course, this would be the earliest that it could have been written. So that means it could be the oldest book of the Bible, even if Job and Abraham were not contemporaries. However, Job shares some striking similarities with the book of Proverbs that could indicate a date around 1000 BC timeframe. Job 28, verse 28, and Proverbs 9:10 are good examples of some of the similar phrases found in both books. Job 28:28 says, "And to man he said, Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding." Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." So we see the similarities between Job and Proverbs. Very, very striking similarities in some cases. Indeed, there is actually one theory out there that Solomon wrote the book of Job. The great reformer Martin Luther seems to have held this view. An interesting twist to this view, though, is when you combine this view with the current favored one among secular scholars. This is the interesting twist is to view that Job was an early Edomite work that was translated and perhaps edited to some extent by Solomon. I tend to favor this view. This view could explain the peculiar Hebrew words in Job and explain the similarities between Job and Solomon. In the end, though, there is no way to say for sure who wrote the book or when the book was written. Is this a problem for the believer? I don't believe so. It's not always necessary to know the authorship or date for a piece of inspired scripture. If God inspired the Bible, then God has the power and sovereignty necessary to put the documents he wants in the Bible and keep the uninspired documents out. The real question, though, is what firm evidence is there that the Bible is inspired of God? We will look at some of that evidence in my next video. In my next video, I will be looking at the prophetic genre, and we will be looking at some of the amazing prophecies that the Bible records, and we'll be looking at how those prophecies have come to pass throughout history.